Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Deborah Hatswell and you're listening to BBR Investigations. Tonight I'll be sharing with you some reports that mention a creature or an unknown being that has a reddish orange eye shine. Mostly seen at night time, the eyes are more visible. In our first case, I spoke with a gentleman from Scotland who shared a painful experience with me that turned into a terrifying event that he is still trying to explain, come to terms with, and recover from. He said, "It was a few years ago when this experience happened to me. I had a friend that meant the world to me, and he sadly passed away at the Forth Road Bridge, which crosses the River Forth in Fife. I go back there every now and again to think about him and the memories we made together. I find it helps with the grief. It's really hard to be there as I miss him so much, but I do feel close to him when I'm there. It's really peaceful. In 2022, I travelled there by car and I was parked up by the waterfront. I was sitting in the car thinking about my friend and how much I missed him when I was suddenly hit with a different feeling. This feeling was other than the loss and the grief I was experiencing, from being there. And it was an awful feeling of dread and it just washed over me. That's how I'd describe it. An existential dread. It was the worst feeling I've ever felt, and I couldn't put rhyme or reason to it. I actually thought, what the fuck's happening? I didn't know what was going on. I was upset when this feeling hit me. I've been crying, trying to pull myself together and shake it off. I wiped my eyes and looked into the rearview mirror of the car, and as I did, I saw something in the trees. The trees are on a small embankment, and way up in the branches I saw something. It looked like reddish orange amber eyeshine. In the darkness, their eyes were piercing red. Then I did something stupid with hindsight, but at the time, I did it without thinking. I got out of the car and I looked over to where the eyes were, so I could look at them with my own eyes, but I couldn't see anything. But in the mirror, they were crystal clear. I couldn't get out of there quick enough, but I did pull myself together and go back about a week later. I parked in the same car park at the same spot on the waterfront. I was able to see that if it had been a person standing in the trees, they must have been really tall. I'm 6'8" and I'm a big Scottish guy. Whatever that was would dwarf me. It had to be huge. It would have been 7.5, 8 feet tall if it was standing on the grass. Or was it possible they were sitting high up in a tree? You'd have to be some freakish NAB basketball player to match what I saw that night. Listening to Eyewitness explain what happened that night conveyed just how disturbing an event this was for him. It doesn't come across well as I'm writing, but it was clear that it had a profound effect on him, and he confirmed he felt better for sharing it. I hope this will help him to move forwards now, and hopefully between us, we can share with him that he's not alone. Extraordinary events happen every day, worldwide, to people just going about their normal daily tasks. There are many reports here in the UK of a red-eyed being that's seen and reported often. In Europe, it's described as the old road ogre, a red-eyed creature that can resemble a beast or a man, and its distinctive orange-red eyeshine is reported in all of the events. First, let's look at the area itself and the other reports. Then we can look at some of the other experiences that people have reported that contained a red-eyed creature. As we know here in the UK, we quite often get reports of strange creatures and supernatural activity along waterways, and this case is no different in that respect. The River Forth is a major river in central Scotland, 47 kilometres long, which drains into the North Sea on the east coast of the country. Its drainage basin covers much of Stirlingshire. Now, the Gaelic name for the upper reach of the river above is the Andarandoo, meaning the Black River. The estuary splits two areas with a high number of cryptid and paranormal and UFO reports. From the Bigfoot reports in the Bathgate Hills to the Taybridge Wildman accounts, there are just numerous. I pulled a few of the reports that may fit with what our witness saw that night. South of the Forth Road Bridge, there's a report of a strange dark figure that was seen near an old burial mound, and this happened in '86. The encounter was reported in February 2015 from a work colleague of Charmaine Fraser's, who was one of the BBR investigators, and that workmate tells of an unusual experience that happened when he was a teenager, growing up in the town of Kirk Newton in West Lothian. He estimates the year to be around 86, 87. He states that he and his friends were daring each other to walk into the local woods one night with a torch. None of them would go first, so they eventually decided to go together. As they were approaching the woods, they saw in the moonlight what is described as a large dark figure that was running across a field adjacent to the woods. It was reportedly running alternately upright and then down on all fours like a gorilla. It then vaulted a fence. The witness said, "It just glided over the fence. It looked like it had a really long neck. We thought it was, trying to cut us off, so we ran for it." And he reported that strange stuff used to happen to them in the local woods. One example happened when he was out with a friend and his dog. As they approached an old walled burial ground in the woods, the dog stopped suddenly, tried to run away, straining on its lead. And he states that it seemed frightened and desperate to get away. So they decided to listen to the dog and leave also. Charmaine added, "He was kind enough to show me the exact location of the incident, and it's on the outskirts of a small town, and the area has a lot of thick, old woodland and a nearby quarry. It's also on a rail line and on the edge of the Pentland Hill Range. There's a report of an ape-like creature on the side of the Edinburgh bypass that happened on the 6th of December 2014. A man who was driving home with his two teenage children and a friend had been to a football game, Hibs and Falkirk, and it was an away game, and they saw a creature as they were driving on the city bypass near Edinburgh. It was around 6 p.m. when he saw it, and he described it as something that looked like a cross between a chimp and a gorilla, and it was moving on all fours along a strip of embankment just under the Calder roundabout on the west side of the city bypass. He stated, "It was moving at some speed, and it seemed like it was scared. Whatever it was pretty big." And he estimates that it was around 4 feet high at the shoulder when standing down on all fours. He turned to his daughter, who was in the passenger seat, and asked if she'd seen it too, and she confirmed that she had. He did not see its face, just the shape of it as it moved. Charmaine added that this location is highly unusual, and on checking found there were no reports of any escaped chimps or any other primates at the time from Edinburgh Zoo or the Wildlife Park in Stirlingshire. It is very close to the east side of the Pentland Hill Range, where reports of howls and a sighting has been documented previously. The person who reported this was good enough to show me exactly where it took place. It's a strip of land on the edge of the bypass, and not what we would expect for a typical location for a cryptid. However, I have no doubt at the credibility of the witness. I've personally known him for 5 years, and he's not prone to fabricating stories. To the north of the Forth Road Bridge, along the coast, we had the tail of a wild man seen in a forest. A report taken by Charmaine Fraser, who also took the report of the running creature in Kirk Newton and the Edinburgh bypass. In fact, with Charmaine's dedicated decades of research, we would not know of these reports or many of the other countless experiences she documented all across Scotland. This report was taken by Charmaine from one of her work colleagues, and it's called the Porter's Bray Wildman. It was reported to Charmaine in 2015, but the incident occurred around 1970. And she says, "I know that's a while ago now, but I've never forgotten about it. So even now I'm confident about what happened and what I saw." About 45 years ago, I was with my then girlfriend, and we were parked on a forestry road at the junction of Landykes Bray and Porter's Bray on the road to Cult. The area is heavy woodland and it's used for forestry. Now, this junction we were parked up in is about 1.5 miles from Kennaway in Fife. I was parked about 300 yards up to the Torloise Forestry Road, and the trees to the left had been cut down about 50 yards. Floor was cleared up to the tree line, stacked up at the side, typical forestry road. There was a full moon, and you could see right across the clearing to the standing trees. My girlfriend said she saw something moving in the clearing, to which I said, "Oh, it'll be a fox or a deer." After a while, I fell asleep in the car until my girlfriend shook me awake and said there was something moving around the stacked trees next to the car, but much closer than before, and it had been moving around for a while now. I wound the window down and banged on the door, but the creature, or whatever it was unfazed. It never moved. I then jumped into the driver's seat, reversed the car so the headlights shone in the direction of this creature. And to my shock and amazement, the creature stood up straight, and only for a second or two, and I could see it clearly. This thing stood around 8 feet tall and had a white, grey chest and face, and the rest of its body was black. It looked at us one last time, and then it took off in the direction of the forest and vanished from sight. We were both confused, and we just sat there trying to think what it could be. And then it came back. This thing started throwing sticks at the car. They weren't little sticks, as you could hear them hitting the car with a thud. And then we heard crashing going through a line of young beech trees near the car. We just drove out of there, and my girlfriend did not want to return. So I went back the next day with my brother. We went to look for tracks or signs, but it had been raining, and we found nothing. I later asked a man I know who has worked all his life in these forests if he knew anything about what he saw, but he'd never come across anything like that. Could these creatures be connected to the red-eyed beings seen by our witness on the Fourth Road Bridge? Other activity on the bridge contained UFO reports, paranormal reports, supernatural events. An Edinburgh woman believes that she's captured a video of a UFO. Melanie Gorin was walking to the shops with her sister at precisely 9:36 p.m. on Boxing Day 2022, when she believes she spotted a strange light hovering in the sky. Melanie said, "I was walking to the shops and I spotted the UFO. It stayed in the sky in front of us. We were on Stevenson's Drive. We were there for at least 6 minutes, probably like 9:42 when it went. It was actually cool to see the UFO." On the 20th of August 2010, a tourist who'd braved Edinburgh's spooky Mary King's Close reckons she came face to face with her own ghostly vision when she was travelling on the train home. 20-year-old Vicky Parr from Keith, Morrisshire, had travelled down to Edinburgh as she was visiting family in the area and enjoyed a day out at the popular attractions. And as she was travelling back home on the train, Vicky decided to take a few snaps of the famous Forth Bridge. She took the photos of the train as it was crossing the bridge, and she got shocked when she saw what was in the images. Vicky found what she believes is the ghost of a woman or a teenage girl, and you can see a misty figure, quite clearly. She's left on the centre of the photograph, and you'll find that photograph in a link down below to the website. The White Lady was not just witnessed by Vicky. There's a local legend of the White Lady of the Bridge. The locals tell of seeing a female ghost who frequents the east end of the town, where the Forth Rail Bridge crosses above the old railway line. One possible explanation for the White Lady is that she was killed on the old railway line on a wedding day, or that she may have jumped from the rail bridge onto the old railway track. There may be more to this tale than just the unfortunate and tragic death of a young lady. Now we know that strange cryptid creatures are often seen on old military defence land, and this is true in my case tonight. Very close to the area we've discussed, in Craigie Hall, was once a well-used army base in Edinburgh, which was used during World War II and the Cold War. But after cuts to budget, it's been left derelict for years. Before reaching the fenced-off Craigie Hall Army Base and Barracks, there's a group of homes nestled behind this kind of like empty housing estate. Shattered windows, paint can be seen peeling away and blinds falling down. It's like a ghost town. Whatever direction you take from the bridge, you will run into more and more reports of upright, hairy creatures or dark mystery figures that could include the creature seen at Queensferry. A dark figure, concealed against or in a tree, would be pretty much invisible if it wasn't for its bright reddish orange eyes. When I was working on the account, I was reminded of several others across the UK that describe a very similar being. In a similar coastal area in England's southwest corner, there's a case in Devon where the witness describes almost exactly the same being seen by the witness at Queensferry. Hi Deborah, I contacted you after an event that happened this spring in the garden of our new cottage. That was 2021 when she reported it. I live in the southwest of England and we moved in here in the summer of 2019. The cottage is new to us, but it was built in 1794 and it's maintained all of its original features. There's a beautiful stone fireplace in the main room, and on the day after we moved into the cottage, our female cat seemed to be interacting with someone or something that I could not see. I came into the room. She was sitting on the ground looking as if she was being petted, all the while looking towards the old stone fireplace. She then began to track around the room as she watched something I could not see as they moved around the sitting room of the cottage. She was completely transfixed. I tried to get her attention to me. She wouldn't look in my direction. I called her name and she still didn't break her concentration. Then she turned and watched as they walked out of one room and into another. I came to realise she was watching more than one individual. I've noticed her react like this a couple of times now. Quite recently, in May of 21, one of my family members was videoing the cat as she was acting really strange again. In the video, you hear my family member call her name, and as he does, a white mist moves across between him and the cat. I have a Reiki teacher who visited after we moved in, and she was able to pick up on 17 spirits that were connected to the house itself. I've had experiences that I felt were made to get my attention, and one very high energy experience around the area of the room where the cat was looking. I could feel energy pressing on me, and my arm hairs were standing straight up. I could also feel a strong feeling of cold air. I never felt scared though, as I accept the spirit world. I don't see spirit, but I do feel things. Since I was a child, I've just known that there's far more out there than what we see. I'm relaxed, about the activity provided. It stays fairly non-obtrusive. Well, I've been here almost 2 years now, and it's stayed fairly positive, but it will occasionally make itself known, more mischievously really than in a menacing way. Though this spring I had an experience with something in the garden that had red eyes, or I should say, I believed they were red eyes. I stepped outside one evening for some air, and I saw something move quickly as it went up into the hedge that surrounds the garden as I was watching it. At first, I thought the two red orbs were lights of some kind. They were around a foot or two from the ground at first, and then they shot upright to about 9 feet off the ground, as if something crouched low to the ground had suddenly stood up. After this happened, I went into the garden in daylight to double check the height, or to see if there was anything around that I could have confused for those red orbs. This made me realise I really had seen something invisible, low down in the hedge of my garden, that rose to around 9 feet in height. I'm unsure, due to the darkness, if this being stood up to the height it was, or if they were sitting in the trees themselves, watching me at the 9 foot height. On other days, as I've been walking through the woodland, I heard a huge kerfuffle in the bushes, as if the garden, there was something out there, something big, like making a racket, and it didn't care who heard it. Now I'm a little bit wary. I always take a torch out with me. At the time, I wasn't scared so much, more confused, but thinking about the way it moved and how tall it was is just unnerving. I live in a very remote part of Devon, and at night there are no lights here, and there are ample places for it to go and hide. Staying in the southeast are two further reports of tall, dark figures with reddish-orange eyeshine. The first is a little ways north of the cottage, not by far, and this is called Red Eyes in the Night, Barnstable. It was back in January 2010 in an area called Barnstable on the southwest coast. It was approximately 5:30 a.m, so it was still dark. I was driving, heading north on the A39 from Camelford to Barnstable. That particular day, my partner was also in the car along with me, as he had an appointment in the same town. There are no street lights down that road, no houses or people around, so it could be pretty eerie at the best of times. Then I saw headlights coming towards us on the other side of the road, and what looked like a set of red glowing eyes. They were moving as if they were on a dog that was walking fast, heading in our direction, if that makes sense. But there was no body or anything there to see, just these two red eyes moving along. And then they just disappeared. I thought I must have been seeing things as I was tired, but it spooked me, so I sped up a bit. And it was at that point that my partner said, "Did you see that then?" And I just said, "Yeah, don't talk about it." And I drove as fast as I could away from the area. In hindsight, we should have talked about it later, but it was so scary. I really just didn't want to think about it again. Another report, also from the southwest, happened in Gloucestershire. Hi Deb, I contacted you about an experience I had many years ago. I'm a 57 musician based in Gloucestershire. I was watching a programme about a strange creature in the UK, and I have an incident like that I'd like to report. In 1989, myself and a friend were camping near the sea just outside of Brixham, Devon. More specifically, we camped at an area called Man Sands. On a late August evening during that trip, we were walking on a gravel track which had a small, steep embankment on either side, which also had barbed wire fencing. As we walked, we became aware of the sound of hooves that sounded like a horse. And as the noise of the hooves came closer, even though it was dark, we were aware, whatever it was big. The creature must have jumped the fence and the embankment and came crashing down onto the gravel, and all we could see were two huge red eyes. I estimated by the eyes that it was about 4.5 feet tall. For half a minute, there was a standoff between us and it. I decided to throw a stone at it, so that's what I did. Then it made some unearthly guttural sounds and started to approach us. At that point, we ran for our lives and took a 3-mile detour back to our tents for fear of coming across it again. And for years afterwards, I was convinced it must have been a big cat, but now I'm not sure. All of the areas mentioned tonight take place very close to the coast and not much of a jot to the estuary. Further north, we come to Cheltenham, an area where I received strange reports of red-eyed creatures. A witness contacted me and told me about an event that happened in 1990. I'm going to give you my account, Deb, of a red-eyed hedge monster. At the time, I was 18 and into the festival lifestyle, and we would pretty much be nomadic then. We lived in old vans that, we'd convert from anything we could adapt, like coaches and caravans. And we'd usually live in some pretty extreme places. Stroud was where most of us was born. It was a hippie town, a bit like Glastonbury. The night all this happened was no different to any other, or I should say it started no differently than any other. I remember it was cold autumn night, and me and my friend Wayne decided to go and get some food. We were living on Haresfield Beacon, which is set on top of an escarpment. There's a large old woodland, and it has very rugged land around it. We had to drive from our camp to go and get food, so we jumped in the car and set off. I was driving about 40 miles per hour because it was foggy. We both knew the road like the back of our hands. The road was clear, but then 50 yards in front of us, from the left to the right, walked this tall, and I mean very tall, man came flying over that wall. This was like a 5 foot, 6 foot Cotswold stone wall. This thing ran in front of the car and looked at us. We were coming up on it fast, and when we were about 40 yards and closing, it didn't care that we were there. It took one step, two steps, looked at us head on. Its eyes were glowing red. And on the third step, it jumped a 6-foot wall on the other side of the road. We slammed on the brakes, but he had already jumped the wall and covered it in 3 steps. We both looked at each other and said at the same time, "What the fuck was that, mate?" I don't know what it was. I don't know what to call it, or how to really explain it. All I can say is, it was at the smallest 7 foot tall, but it was also very skinny. We had to carry on. We went down to the shop with us, Bob talking to each other about what the fuck we'd seen. You know, we saw it had red eyes, and you could see them clearly. It was just freaky. As we drove, we talked on and on about it. And on the way back, we got out of the car where we'd seen it. I had a big security mag light in the car, and I wanted to see how it had just vanished over that wall. We shone the light. The wall had no style in it, for this thing to pass through. It must have jumped that wall moving at speed. Over the next 5 weeks, the red-eyed thing was seen by other people living in the vans in different parts of the area, and they'd tell each other about it. After a bit of time, it sort of became like a rural legend. The funny thing is, me and Wayne didn't mention it to anyone else, and we were told a few days later that our mate Hector had seen some weirdo spying on him in the woods when he was taking firewood at the night, and he said that this thing also had red eyes. Then it was spotted by other travellers lurking in the bushes, and they would mention the red eyes also. I think there's something about the red-eyed things, it's just creepy. I think it's the unknown, the not knowing what stalks you or watches you from the trees as you walk faster and faster in the hopes that you make it out to the light of the streets before the bearer of the eyes catches up with you. Not knowing what those eyes belong to or how large and powerful it is must be awful. What is out there in the night that sometimes walks on 4 legs like a shuck or a shug, yet it can also walk on 2 legs like a man, and is sometimes described as ape-like, dog-like, or even minotaur in shape. Now, I would like to share with you an account sent to me by 4 listeners to the show after I'd shared a number of other red-eyed creature reports, and they wanted me to share theirs because they were very similar. Our first report takes place in Hombeek in Belgium, and our witness said, "A stone's throw away from the park in Michelin, I've seen a large black dog following behind for a distance. It was about 10 feet away from me. It did seem real. It was more like a shadow. I made it to the pub safely, and I told an older couple what I saw, and the man's eyes widened and said, 'You've seen the old road Hogan.' I asked more of what he was speaking of, and he said it was none of my concern, but not to look into its eyes. He said that some people still carry a candle when walking during the evening hours, and they light it when the dog is seen. When that candle's lit, it scares the dog away. I also heard years later that people used to keep a candle burning during the cold months in winter to keep family members safe at night from the old road Hogan." That report came in from somebody called Spankies, and a few weeks before Spanky left his comment explaining the experience, I was contacted by a lady who also saw the same creature. Sadly, she didn't tell me where the event happened. She just gave me the details of the report. And she says, "I saw the old road Hogan when I was 5. I went down for a drink of water in the middle of the night. I had a scary feeling. When I got to go to the stairs, I heard a clear growl behind my back, and something felt like it scratched my leg. I turned around so fast, and I saw this massive black dog with pointy ears and glowing red eyes, and for the quickest split second ever, it all happened so fast. It felt like I flew up the stairs. Because I ran so fast up to my dad's room, I was hysterical, crying and hyperventilating, shaking. I barely even able to tell my dad what had happened. I remember what happened like it was yesterday, and I still have such a clear image in my head that it will never leave my mind." Our next report of a red-eyed beast comes from Carthage in Arkansas, and the chap said, "I've seen the old road Hogan. Me and my ex-girlfriend and her sister, on the way to her boyfriend's job to pick him up from work in Carthage, Arkansas. It's nothing but a wooded area there. On the way there, we saw this huge black werewolf-like creature with glowing red eyes, and it ran in front of her Tahoe and looked directly at us and clearing across the road before it could get hit. Keep in mind that we're in a Tahoe. This creature was still eye level to us while running on all fours, so no, it was nothing I've ever seen before or since, and we all saw it clearly. Our next report is called "It Was a Hyena with Red Eyes." The witness said, "I've had a lot of weird things happen in my life. Most of them I don't remember at all. They're totally blanked out. My middle sister can't understand why I don't remember these events, as I'm one who, brought up a lot of what was happening to protect her. She, the poor thing, has never been able to forget a single detail. This particular event I want to share with you happened 35 years ago, just after I turned 14. It did not involve my sister for once. I talked to her about it probably 10 years ago, and she had no idea of anything odd that happened at that house. My father was a preacher. We moved every other year, sometimes more frequently. We just moved from a homeless situation into a new home. It's still there now, but the building at that location, they've changed a bit. The configuration isn't really that important, just that our home was closer to the graveyard than any other building. And there were woods beside and behind the house, which were much closer to the buildings. When we first moved in, there were some neighbours in a little mobile home on the property just south of the house. Their site was really run down. Lots of old appliances and crap surrounding it. It was situated inside the trees in a small clearing that was visible from my southern window. My room was on the southwest corner of the house, with large double windows looking south and another set looking west, overlooking the southern end of the graveyard. The graveyard and western windows never bothered me, except when there were critters foraging around in the trash cans under my window. That was merely annoying. The southern window, though, was very different. In that mobile home lived a man and a woman who it seems to be now were probably on drugs. They had a couple of large, terrifying, vicious dogs on seriously heavy chains. They'd never gotten loose as far as I know, but they terrified me. I was sure one particular dog was going to come crashing through my window in the night. I was convinced of it. It was a deep feeling of knowing, kind of an inevitable. I mean, it never happened, of course. I have no idea what breeds they were. They were just huge, and they were mean, and they were probably abused and neglected. Somehow, very soon after we moved in, my dad had the people kicked out and all their stuff cleaned off the land. It must have belonged to the church, or I don't think he could have gotten them out of there quickly. One day they were there, and the next everything was gone. The speed and finality was a little bit frightening. We never saw those people or their dogs again. It didn't matter. I was still very unhappy about the area and never even looked over there if I could help it. Every single evening before sundown, I'd shut my big heavy drapes very snugly, not one gap anywhere, ever, and I didn't open them again until after daylight. There was also a small closet at the southeast corner of the room that I'm vaguely unhappy. I remember being unhappy about it. I can't remember why. Never had childhood fears of closets, just the witch under the bed when I was really small. I have no idea where that came from. We didn't have a television set for most of my growing up years. I never saw stuff like that or heard scary stories of that nature. We never went to anyone's house because we were always the new kids, and we moved away again by the time we started making connections. So there was no influence from other kids at school, and nothing like that was ever talked about at church. That witch under the bed fear has long since faded. I don't know why I mentioned the closet, because nothing ever happened to it. It's just part of my memories of that room. Although now that I think about it, when I first saw that black thing, it was at the corner of the bed, closest to the closet. The parsonage was a 4-bedroomed house. It was old, fairly spacious. None of the rest of the house had a weird feeling to me, just my room. And even then, only at night. My double bed was placed under the western set of windows, so the southern ones were on my right. One night, after we were all moved in and unpacked and the neighbours were gone, I just settled into bed when for some reason I opened my eyes. I looked over the footboard, no reason I was aware of. I heard no sounds and no feeling. I just opened my eyes and looked. Then, moving slowly from the right to the left and then back again, was a dark, flat shape with glowing red eyes. It made no noise. It didn't have a smell. It looked two-dimensional, like it was flat. But somehow I was aware that it had depth and substance. My room was very dark with the lights off, and I didn't have a nightlight. But the darkness of this prowling thing was unlike any black I'd ever seen before or since. The shape was like a hyena or a very, very large raccoon, with that weird hunched up back and their heads hunched below the shoulders. The glowing red eyes were like large glowing coals. They just glowed, but they did not emit any light. They did not illuminate anything, not even any part of this thing's face. And they were very large for the size of the head. Weirdly, I couldn't discern any difference between the head and the body. I just knew how it would be if I were able to see it. There were no features to the head, the face, or the body, just an outline of the whole shape and those two eyes. It was not furry looking. It was just a smooth outline shape of what I interpreted at the time to be a dog thing. It seemed canine to me, but for no reason I can pinpoint. It may have been down to my well-established childhood fear of dogs, I don't know. I don't know how long I sat there watching it, and I didn't feel anything. No fear, no panic. One second I was looking at it, the next I was flying up and over my bed to reach the light switch on the wall. I jumped in one movement from my bed over the top of the footboard, and I hit the switch as I landed. I never, ever, ever turned that light up again. I didn't sleep at night the whole 2 years we lived there. I stuffed a towel under the door so my dad wouldn't see the light on if he came down to check on things. I sat on my desk and painted all night long. Every single night we lived there after that. I've never been so artistically productive before or since. And once we left that place, I had no trouble sleeping, even as we lived there. Even as I did my nightly routine of gathering my paints and water and stuffing the towel under the door, I never gave that shadow thing a second thought. I never thought of it again. But I never trusted the dark, in that room either. It was gone from my mind, like it had never happened. But it changed everything for me while we lived there. And it was years and years later when I thought of that thing again. I would like to make this clear. I do not think it was a demon, as I understand what people mean when they say that word. I don't think that's what it was. But I don't believe in these kind of embodiments of evil from hell. As best as I can figure, it was something tied to the land. Why it only affected my room, I don't know. But there's something else I just remembered whilst I was writing about the red-eyed thing, the red-eyed dog thing. There had been a one-room schoolhouse, which had probably also been the original church, right behind our home and my bedroom, between my room and the graveyard. We could still see the outline of part of the foundation, and an old man at the church told me once that when he was a kid, he'd gone to school and seen that it had burned down in the night. He returned home and was whipped for telling his father a lie about the school burning down. And his father found out later it was true, of course. And I don't know if they made amends, but that schoolhouse, right at the corner of my bedroom, that's where it once burned down. It was never rebuilt on that land. So now I wonder if this black thing was something attached to that land. In my own thinking, not backed up with any research, there's a very good chance it had something to do with the original inhabitants of the area, and they were driven off the land by the European immigrants. In the last 15 years or so, I've heard the word shook, and I'm still unclear exactly what is meant by that. Up until then, I'd never heard anything like that black thing before. I didn't grow up with images of gargoyles, or creepy old paintings. The churches my dad preached in were modern, weirdly, We did have a background of superstition, of demons and stuff, but they were just something to have a theoretical, nervousness about, that's all. So I had absolutely no idea what that black thing was. I'm sure that helped me deal with it. If I'd already had a name for it, and any fear of it, I'd probably have been reduced to a blubbering mess. I could never have recovered from that. It never occurred to me to even mention it to my parents. They would have thought I was just trying to get attention. I couldn't tell my sisters because I was the oldest, and there was no way I was going to freak them out, especially when I had no answers and no way of getting any. So I just painted at night. I dragged myself to school, crashed in the afternoon, and painted all the night for the next 2 years. The way we left the place was humiliating. The church board kicked my dad out, but it was a relief to be gone. Each and every one of our witnesses tonight have one thing in common. Every one of them thought they were the only person on this earth that saw a set of red, glowing eyes. And as you can see, there are quite a few of them, and that is just a tiny tip of a massive iceberg. There are hundreds of reports worldwide of a dark thing concealing itself in the night with two red, glowing eyes. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you'll join me for future episodes. I release content like this every week, and I'm sure I'll cover a topic you enjoy, so don't miss out. Hit that follow or like button. Please check out my YouTube and Patreon memberships for early or exclusive content, and you can find the link to them and my social media and donation sites in one handy link tree below. BBR is not funded, so any donation, no matter how small, is highly appreciated. So I will bid you adieu, and I will be back at the same time, the same day, with more from the BBR Case Files.